Thank you for joining us. I'm Raymond Goh, and this is Nightline. Our top stories. Malaysia proposes the formulation of a post-COVID-19 ASEAN economic recovery plan.
Excellencies.
No more compounds, only remand for MCO violators. And IMF says Eurozone economy to crash in 2020. Good morning. Malaysia proposes the formulation of a post-COVID-19 ASEAN economic recovery plan designed to focus not only on the financial aspects, but also social security, food security, and education on the regional population. Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said the plan needed to include measures to secure a supply network to 600 million people in the region.
Malaysia urges our ASEAN member states to reinforce ourselves in facing a new landscape in our region. We must not allow ASEAN to revert back to our comfort zone, but make ASEAN emerge as a new growth center, a new powerhouse, not just for our 600 million people, but for the world.
Tan Sri Muhyiddin was speaking at a special ASEAN summit on COVID-19 via video conferencing chaired by his Vietnamese counterpart, Nguyen Xuan Phuc. Among the measures are to ensure supply chain, including ensuring a smooth flow of supplies for medical, food and essentials, in addition to critical infrastructure for trade routes by air, land and sea. According to him, in every crisis there is an opportunity, and all countries face the same problem, and ASEAN needs to work together to ensure that no one is left out. Malaysia also supported the creation of the ASEAN COVID-19 Special Fund to enhance the scale of the existing emergency stock in the face of possible future outbreaks.
We must further develop our regional reserves of medical supplies, as well as utilize relevant ASEAN reserve warehouses to support the needs of ASEAN member states in public health emergencies.
He said the various ASEAN mechanisms and structures led by Malaysia, such as the ASEAN Emergency Operations Network Centre for Public Health Emergency and the ASEAN Risk and Communication Assessment Centre, have proven to work effectively in finding crisis solutions. The Prime Minister also assured that Malaysia was prepared to fight the COVID-19 pandemic with ASEAN. No more fines but court action. This was the National Security Council NSC's strong message on Tuesday to violators of the Movement Control Order MCO as the country moves into its third stage on Wednesday. National Security Council's Senior Minister of Security Cluster, Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, said the move is necessary as the people's expectation is high for the authorities to impose stiffer penalties on those who breach the MCO. Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri, who's also the Defence Minister, revealed that since the MCO was put in place on March 18th, more than 9,000 people have been arrested nationwide over MCO defiance. He went on to say that perhaps the 1,000 ringgit is not high enough to scare potential violators.
Pihak polis mulai besok tidak lagi memberikan tumpuan kepada kompaun. Mulai besok, sesiapa yang ditahan akan diremand ataupun dan dihadapkan ke mahkamah. Biarlah mahkamah yang memutuskan, kerana berdasarkan Seksyen 24 Akta 342 bahawa mahkamah boleh menghukum mereka tidak lebih daripada 2 tahun penjara dan kesalahan seterusnya 5 tahun penjara.
The senior minister further revealed that more than 1,300 individuals were nabbed on Monday. A large number of them have been issued with compound notices of 1,000 ringgit and more than 400 were remanded to facilitate probe. Dato Sri Ismail Sabri also announced that the Masjid India area has been placed under an enhancement movement control order, except for the Dangwangi District Police Headquarters and DBKL Homeless Monitoring Centre, as more than 40 people have tested positive for COVID-19.
Ini termasuklah di Jalan Munshi Abdullah, Jalan Danwangi, Jalan Tuanku Abdul Rahman, Jalan Tun Perak, Jalan Melaka dan Jalan Ampang di sekitar Masjid India, kawasan Masjid India. Dan akan berkuat kuasa mulai 14 April 2020 sehingga 28 April.
Aside from several hotels, Semua House, Maidin, Complex Campbell, Wisma Kosas and Wisma Yakin fall within the affected area. The area affected has a radius of about 1 kilometre and has more than 10,000 people, including 6,000 at the Selangor Mansion and Malayan Mansion flats and 3,200 people at Menara City 1. Dato Sri Ismail also said that the enhanced MCO in Kampung Dato Ibrahim Masjid and Bandar Baru Dato Ibrahim Masjid in Simpang Renggam, Kluang Johor will be extended until April 28th. At the media conference, Dato Sri Ismail Sabri also said that the government will be implementing ceiling prices on 12 essential items from April 15th until 28th. He said there was sufficient supply of items and there was no need to panic and no need for panic buying, as the sale of essential items are being closely monitored.
Antara barangan yang dipantau termasuklah barang makanan kering seperti gula, minyak masak, beras dan sebagainya. Begitu juga dengan barangan segar seperti ayam, sayur-sayuran, telur, bawang dan sebagainya. Begitulah juga dengan barangan kebersihan seperti topeng muka, hand sanitizer, lamping bayi dan lain-lain.
The details of the scheme would be announced by the Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs Ministry. He said the Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs Ministry's enforcement team had carried out checks on 1,133 business premises, including sundry shops 844, wholesalers 260, and factories 29. Nearly half of Malaysia's COVID-19 patients have fully recovered and have been discharged from hospitals. Health Director General Dr. Noor Hisham Abdullah reported 202 more recoveries on Tuesday, bringing the total to 2,478 cases, or 49.7% of all cases detected.
Kementerian Kesihatan Malaysia ingin memaklumkan bahawa terdapat 202 kes yang telah pulih dan dibenarkan discharge pada hari ini. Ini menjadikan jumlah kumulatif kes yang pulih sepenuhnya dari jangkitan COVID-19 dan telah discharge pada ward adalah sebanyak 2,478 kes, iaitu bersamaan dengan 49.7%, iaitu hampir separuh daripada jumlah keseluruhan kes.
5 more deaths were also reported on Tuesday, bringing the total to 82 deaths, or 1.64% of total cases. One of the deaths involves an unidentified man who was found dead in Kota Kinabalu, Sabah on April 6 and was tested positive for COVID-19 during post-mortem. Dr. Noor Hisham said the man was found without any identification and is believed to be a non-Malaysian, and stated that the case, however, is still under police investigation. In the meantime, Malaysia also recorded 170 new COVID-19 cases, taking the total number of confirmed infections in the country to 4,987. A total of 6.6 million Malaysians have received the Bantuan Prihatin Nasional (BPN) assistance, totaling 4.9 billion ringgit. Finance Minister Dato Sri Tengku Zafrul Aziz said 6 of the 10 main measures under the Prihatin Rakyat Economic Stimulus Package, Prihatin, worth 180 billion ringgit, or 69% of the whole package, have been implemented until April 12th. The measures were the 100 billion ringgit banking institution loan moratorium, I-Lestari facility, namely withdrawal of Account 2 of the Employees Provident Fund, EPF, worth 40 billion ringgit, and a wage subsidy undertaken by the Social Security Organisation SOCSO, worth 13.8 billion ringgit. In a video broadcast on his Facebook on Tuesday, Datuk Sri Tengku Zafrul said that measures also included reducing the minimum employee contribution rate to the EPF, amounting to 10 billion ringgit, Bantuan Prihatin Nasional amounting to 10 billion ringgit, and Bank Negara Malaysia's Special Relief Fund worth 5 billion ringgit. The Finance Minister said the remaining 4 measures worth 66 billion ringgit, or 25% of total value of the Prihatin package, would be implemented by May 1st, 2020, in line with a planned implementation schedule. He said approval was given to 8.3 million Malaysians for the BPN. New applications stood at 2.77 million, while 274,000 people have filed in their appeal.
Sukacita saya berkongsi bahawa sehingga 12 April 2020, seramai 3.2 juta ataupun 96.6% isi rumah B40 dan 3.4 juta ataupun 92.3% individu B40 telah menerima pembayaran berjumlah 3.2 bilion ringgit dan 1.7 bilion masing-masing. Dan keseluruhannya adalah 4.9 billion ringgit.
He said from April 13th to 15th, a further 750 million ringgit will be channeled to about 1.5 million recipients. The Dewan Rakyat sitting is expected to convene from May 18th, but in a controlled setting, if the nation is still under the Movement Control Order, MCO. Deputy Speaker Dr. Muhammad Rashid Hasnan said the sitting needs to be convened before June 5th, or 6 months after the last sitting, which was concluded on December 5th last year. He said so far the Dewan Rakyat sitting will proceed according to the date set. Dato' Muhammad Rashid also noted that only members of parliament, special government officers and ministers be allowed to be present in the August House during the sittings. The Dewan Rakyat sitting this time will see Perikatan Nasional (PN) represented by Parti Pribumi Bersatu Malaysia (Bersatu), UMNO, MCA, MIC and Gabungan Parti Sarawak (GPS) coming forward as the government bloc, while the Pakatan Harapan Coalition is represented by the DAP, PKR and Amanah as the opposition. Partying during MCO, 63 remanded for 4 days. This and more local stories when we come back. Nightline continues. In Selangor, a group of foreign workers have been remanded for allegedly celebrating the Songkran Water Festival within the compounds of their hostel, despite orders to remain indoors during the Movement Control Order, MCO. Sepang District Police Chief ACP 1 Kamarul Azran 1 Yusof said all 63 suspects have been remanded for 4 days until April 17th. He also clarified that 63 suspects were arrested instead of the previously reported 62. Acting on a police report on the matter on Monday, police arrested the group after a video of them celebrating Songkran near a factory dormitory had gone viral on social media. ACP 1 Kamarul said the case is also being investigated for inciting a community to commit an offence against another under the Penal Code and disobeying orders issued by authorised officers under the Prevention and Control of Infectious Diseases Act 1988. The 63 individuals are also being investigated for improper use of network facilities under the Communications and Multimedia Act 1998. In other news, Malaysia's unemployment rate was still unaffected by the internal shock caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Department of Statistics said the unemployment rate for the month of February was 3.3%, compared with 3.2% January. In a statement, its chief statistician, Datuk Sri Muhammad Uzair Mahidin, said he expects the pandemic to have an impact on the unemployment rate beginning in March. As for the number of labour force, the figure for February was up 2.1% to 15.87 million persons against the same period last year. Employed persons also increased 2.1% to 15.34 million persons. In Kuantan Pahang, a hospital consultant lost more than 63,000 ringgit from his savings account after sharing his personal banking information on a fake Bank Negara Malaysia page. Pahang Commercial CID Head Superintendent Muhammad Wazir Muhammad Yusof said a 60-year-old victim realized the money was gone 2 days after he dealt with 3 men, supposedly from the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, MACC, and the police. The 3 men had claimed that the victim had failed to pay the income tax of a furniture company that was registered under his name and had connections to a drug case. The victim was then told to open a link on a website and fill up the information required for investigation purposes. Investigations are being conducted under the Penal Code, which provides a jail sentence of up to 10 years and caning with the possibility of a fine if convicted. Another 2 weeks of extension of the government-enforced stay-at-home order have ostensibly led to an increase in domestic violence in the country. The government is urged to weigh and recognize domestic violence as a public health crisis, as mounting data suggests that domestic abuse is flourishing in the conditions created by the COVID-19 pandemic and setting up of temporary emergency shelters as a result of the crisis. Azrin Abra has the details.
Women's Aid Organization WAO shared its statistics that show an approximate 44% surge in hotline calls and its texting service TINA on domestic violence to the group from February to March this year, and weekly increase of reports since the Movement Control Order MCO began on March 18th. While another agency, All Women's Action Society Awam, agreed that an increase is clearly evident now as it received 21 new cases, including reports on domestic violence, sexual harassment, divorce and relationships within this period. The biggest worry for groups like WAO and Awam with the MCO in place is that there is an increased risk of violence as many victims and those considered at risk will be unable to seek help or escape as they are living under the same roof as their abuse.
This is the time where tensions are built within the home, because on top of not being able to move about, people are really concerned about their livelihoods. What's going to happen next? Am I going to have a job? Is my salary going to be cut? Do I have enough savings, to survive through MCO and COVID-19 period? But this is in no way an excuse for domestic violence.
Meanwhile, of the 21 cases received by Awam, 16 reports were made by women, 3 by men, and 2 which the gender is unknown.
Being trapped at home only increases the risk of abuse. Also, nowadays, more women as compared to before are handling household finances and taking care of the family. With less income during the MCO, this only adds to their stress levels. Women in the B40, for example, who have lost their side income are now financially dependent on their spouse.
In addition to physical violence, which is not present in every abusive relationship, common tools of abuse include isolation from friends, family, and employment, constant surveillance, and restrictions on access to basic necessities such as food and clothing. Both NGOs are now scrambling to offer services to those at risk, while the government is urged, among others, to issue a clear standard operating procedure SOP for responding to domestic violence during the MCO and to ensure the SOPs are adhered to. Government is also urged to adopt measures ensuring that victims of abuses have access to legal aid, such as restraining orders, even during crisis.
the government to recognize domestic violence as a public health issue that should be taken just as seriously as COVID-19. In fact, the government should be setting up, temporary closed shelters. Many of the shelters are at max capacity and cannot support the request and the increase of women and children who need shelter from domestic violence. So those messaging from society to women, it's all about placing responsibility on the woman to avoid getting abused, when the messaging ought to be that domestic violence is a criminal offense and it needs to stop. And should it occur, there are consequences to it. So these are messages that it's a shift in mindset for society.
This is not to be taken lightly, as it has long-term effects not only on the survivor but on the family and community. Even normal processes such as the protection order, for example, it's difficult to obtain at this point. Even then, all this means little when survivors cannot leave their homes without fear of risking violence or abuse. This is why we need the different ministries such as KPWKM, MKN, KKM, PDRM to work together to ensure that access is always there for survivors, that no matter what, they can get help. Clear and standardized guidelines must be given to each and every stakeholder so that they can respond properly and effectively when confronted with a case of DV during the MCO.
The United Nations recently called on governments across the globe for urgent action to combat the worldwide surge in domestic violence and to put women's safety first as they respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Survivors must continue to reach out to the various channels for help. The Women and Family Development Ministry's Talian Kasih can also be contacted by phone line or WhatsApp as stated on the screen. Seek help if you need it. All it takes is just one call or a text. With millions of people being confined to their homes under the movement control order, more people are becoming victims to domestic violence. Although this step taken is necessary in breaking the chain of infection, there need to be better social infrastructure to assist these survivors. The COVID-19 pandemic is an acutely important time for the government to consider suggestions by the NGOs. Azrin Abra for Nightline, TV3.
Still to come, Indonesia records 60 more COVID-19 deaths. Welcome back. International Monetary Fund, IMF, have drastically slashed its growth estimates for the Eurozone on Tuesday as virus lockdowns decimated the European economy. The IMF said the Eurozone economy would crash by a staggering 7.5% this year, a free fall not seen since the 1930s Great Depression. The IMF also projected Britain, which left the European Union in January and was never part of the Eurozone, would see its economy contract by 6.5% and French economy to shrivel by 7.2% instead of a 1.3% expansion. It added Italy's economy was on course to a slump by 9.1% in 2020, followed by an expansion of just below 5% the following year. The European region overall was predicted to have the worst performance of any region in the world. In a note of optimism, however, the IMF said the economic destruction wrought by the pandemic in the Eurozone would fade in the second half of 2020 as a gradual lifting of containment measures gains momentum. The 19 countries that use the euro currency would then recover, but at a far slower pace, with the IMF predicting a growth of 4.7% in 2021. Indonesia continues to be the country with the highest number of COVID-19 fatalities in Southeast Asia, as the Health Ministry announced 60 more deaths on Tuesday, bringing the total to 459. Health Ministry Disease Control and Prevention Director General Ahmad Yuryanto also announced 282 new cases on Tuesday, taking the nationwide total of confirmed cases to 4,839. Indonesia's case fatality rate is currently the highest in Southeast Asia at 9.4%, significantly higher than the rate in the Philippines, which is the second highest despite the latter's higher number of cases. The Philippines has recorded 5,223 cases as of Tuesday, with 335 deaths. The virus has spread to all of Indonesia's 34 provinces. Jakarta and West Java are the hardest hit, with 2,335 and 530 confirmed cases, respectively. Singapore reported 334 new cases of COVID-19 on Tuesday, bringing the national total to 3,252. None of the new cases reported on Tuesday are imported. Of the new cases, 189 are linked to previously identified clusters and 23 are linked to the other local cases. A total of 122 are still unlinked, pending contact tracing. Of these, 24 are Singapore citizens and the remaining 98 are long-term pass holders. Singapore also recorded one more death on Tuesday, bringing the total number of COVID-19 fatalities in the country to 10. The 70-year-old man who died was confirmed to have the infection on March 6 and was linked to the Safra Jurong cluster. Arsenal on hunt for new Patrick Vieira. This story after the short break. Sports football now. Arsenal are believed to be leading the chase for Atletico Madrid midfield destroyer Thomas Partey and have already put down a $63 million bid on the table. Partey recently caught the eye of the English viewers with a robust and classy display at Anfield as Atletico stunned holders Liverpool with a 3-2 win in the second leg to advance to the quarter-finals of the Champions League. The 26-year-old Ghanaian international became a key man for Diego Simeone's side, and his impressive performance against Jurgen Klopp's men has again put some of Europe's big clubs on alert. However, it was Arsenal who appeared to be leading the race, according to a report in Corriere dello Sport. The Italian newspaper claims that Arsenal have $63 million on the table for Partey, who is now one step away from a move to the Emirates. Partey would certainly be a major upgrade as new boss Mikel Arteta continues his rebuilding job, having taken over in December. Now, before we wrap up this edition of Nightline, let's take a look at what has been installed on the front pages of Malaysia's main newspapers for Wednesday, April the 15th. The New Straits Times focuses on the 5th enhanced MCO placed on Masjid, India, to contain the spread of COVID-19. While Harian Metro and Berita Harian both highlight on the government's decision to introduce sterner action against MCO violators. Beginning today, the violators will risk being arrested as compounds will no longer be issued by the police. And a report on billions of revenue losses due to the shrink of retail sales gets the front page of the Malaysian Reserve. Make sure you get your copies today, or better still, subscribe to the e-paper versions. And that's all for Nightline this time around. We wish to thank all our frontliners for their dedication and sacrifices in the battle against COVID-19. You are already part of history as Malaysia's heroes. To all our viewers, please help all the frontliners by staying at home. With that, I'm Raymond Goh. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you stay home, stay safe, stay well. Take care.